Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for Fairfield County Virtual Community. I would like to introduce Kayla Hiddle from Fairfield County and Alicia McNeil from Gracehaven, and they're going to present today and just kind of have a conversation with us about human trafficking awareness. So I'll let you guys, whoever wants to start first, go ahead.
Okay, Alicia, do you want to go ahead and give us the rundown of the human trafficking myths, facts, and red flags, and then I can do a little more specific about what we do with Fairfield County?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So Gracehaven is an organization that serves trafficked or at-risk trafficked youth all over Ohio. We have a group home in Columbus for girls ages 12 to 18. And then we have case management services that serve youth all over Ohio who have either been trafficked or have a high risk of being trafficked. And we'll talk about what that means in a couple of minutes. And so we provide case management to the youth who are not at our group home. And that could be if they're in foster care, if they're in another residential, if they're in detention center, or if they're living at home. And then we also work really hard to provide education and training to everyone in Ohio, whoever will listen to us. So one of the things that we really like to talk about is the myths and the facts of human trafficking. Typically, when I ask an audience, what do you think of or what comes to your mind when you hear human trafficking? They're usually things like kidnapping, isolations, beatings. A lot of times they say the creepy man in the white van with no windows. And they say the movie Taken. And those things are true. Sometimes people are kidnapped, and sometimes it involves a creepy man in a strange car. But most of the time, traffickers and victims know one another pretty well. About 91% of the time, the victim knows their trafficker. And a majority of that time, it is a family member or a close friend or a romantic partner. And so that's only 9% of the time that it would be someone that they don't know. And that might not be kidnapping. That might be that they met somebody online, or it's a youth who has run away and they come across somebody and they're like, I need a ride, or I ran away, I need a place to stay tonight. And then that person says, you can stay with me if you have sex with me or do this sexual interaction with me. Also, people tend to think that it's mostly boys who are trafficked. I mean, girls, sorry. They think that's mostly girls, and that's not true. The truth is that boys make up about 38% of trafficked youth that that report it. It's probably a higher number. We call this that it's kind of the secret crime, or it's the crime that's happening in plain sight. It's not always reported, it's not always seen. And so I'm sure that the numbers that we have are not accurate. It's probably higher. The numbers we do have when it comes to youth being trafficked in Ohio is about 1,100 youth are trafficked in Ohio every year. And we also have about 4,000 kids who are runaways every year in Ohio, and they are also at risk of being trafficked. So if you just think about our state and that number of kids, that's quite a bit significant. Yeah, so let's talk about why Ohio. Why are our numbers what they are? We're actually the 5th highest state in the country, the leading state for human trafficking. And part of that is because of our extensive highway system. We have a lot of highways. You can get from place A to place B pretty quickly. You can get out of the state pretty quickly. We have a high poverty rate, and we have a high opioid crisis. And oftentimes poverty and drug use is related or correlated to human trafficking. We have a high number of strip clubs, and strip clubs are often used as a gateway You know, if someone tells a girl, you can come and you can dance and you can make money and you feel powerful and people like you and they want you. And that is so appealing to youth who are just looking for acceptance and belonging. It also may fill a financial need that they have. And so that can often be used as traffickers as a way to kind of get girls into that lifestyle. There's also a belief that it's only happening in large cities, and that is not true either. It definitely happens in small town Ohio. It doesn't take much of a Google search to find human trafficking arrests or human trafficking sting operations that take place in Fairfield County. There's been a couple in Scioto County, in everywhere. It's just everywhere. So I think that sometimes people believe we're a small town and we know each other and I would know if this was happening. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Traffickers are really tricky and they're really manipulative. And a lot of the times the reason that it becomes so messy for victims is because this trafficker has inserted themselves in a way in this person's life where they feel like they could trust that person, or they have met needs. That could be a need to belong. It could be a need to get money. It could be that my home has domestic violence and I need another place to stay. And so I ran into the arms of somebody who pretended they would be safe and they weren't. And so there's this relationship that develops. There's a trust, there's a dependency. And then the trafficker begins to isolate and plant doubts about the other support people that are in that person's life. Why do your parents treat you that way? Why are they so hard on you? Or why do they expect you to take care of your younger siblings? Why won't they just let you be a kid? Or why are your friends so immature? Or your friends should respond better that way, or they should text you back sooner, or they should invite you to what they're doing more often. And they begin to plant these doubts and just create this isolation. Or there's a repayment. I've let you stay on my couch. Or when you needed new shoes, I got you those new shoes for you. Or we're in a relationship together and I need you to help me pay my bills. And so that's kind of how that, like, I need you to help me out. We're in this together. I've helped you. I need you to help me. And then it moves into abuse and manipulation and threats and intimidation. You know, in this day and age and social media, there is a lot of sexting and sharing pictures. And then they'll say, you know, I'm going to send these pictures that you sent to me to your school or to your parents or to whoever else that would be mortifying for them. Or I will go look for your siblings or your parents, whatever it is. It kind of makes that youth feel like I cannot get out of this, or I have to continue to do this. That's what they use. So I say all that to just try to help you to understand the grooming process and the manipulation and the psychological coercion that goes into trafficking. And also one more thing is to talk about online. Traffickers are wherever there are not adults. I mean, they're where their adults are too, but it's easier to have access to youth and to manipulate them when they're not under direct adult supervision, right? And so when kids are on gaming sites, Minecraft and Fortnite, people will go on there and they will befriend the youth. They will either pretend to be that kiddo's age, and they will be on the same time that the kiddo was on, and they will develop some kind of gaming relationship. And then they'll start to talk about, where do you go to school and what other things do you like to do? And begin to just kind of develop this friendship with that youth, and then be like, we should talk offline. Do you want to talk on Snapchat? Do you want to talk through Instagram? Do you want to exchange phone numbers? And they just kind of increase. And then it's like, do you want to share pictures? I'm so glad that I can trust you. We become good friends. We know that for teenagers and social media and how many friends do you have, that's a really big deal. And how many likes do you get on a post, that's a really big deal. And a lot of them don't keep their profiles private. And so they're accepting friend requests from someone that they don't know or a friend of a friend. And again, that same kind of thing, that trafficker will just take the time to study their posts and try to develop a relationship with them with a means to manipulate and exploit. I can answer questions, or maybe Kayla, do you want to share a little bit then about how Gracehaven's relationship is, in Fairfield County and with Safe Harbor?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you a little background about what the Fairfield County Juvenile Court's doing. So the Fairfield County Juvenile Court recognized the risks of human trafficking in Fairfield County, and we developed policies to identify and support those youth who are at risk or who are identified as having been trafficked. So we created a program called Safe Harbor Diversion. And I feel like that would be confusing for me to explain to you if you didn't have a little background knowledge of what diversion is in general. So my brief little intro to Diversion 101. It's an intervention program that the court offers to youth and families, and that's just to try to prevent any further involvement with the juvenile justice system. So it's really informal. It's not held at the courthouse. We have a separate offsite location, and there's no fines or cost to participate. So unlike having to appear in court before a judge, you get a pretty chill face. You get me, or you get my other coworker here. We're not as intimidating for a youth who might not have such a high criminal background. We don't have harsh sanctions like sending kids to juvenile detention or utilizing GPS monitoring. They can't lose the right to apply for their driver's license. And the big kicker, the real deal here, is that if the youth completes diversion successfully, their case will be sealed and expunged as if it never happened. So nothing will follow them on until their adult life or cause any harm to their future success. So Safe Harbor Diversion is kind of a branch off of traditional diversion, and it was developed as an intervention. So the youth doesn't have to identify as a victim. It allows the youth to be able to utilize the services under Safe Harbor Diversion regardless of when that victimization is identified. So it could happen when the police officer is responding to the scene. It could happen when the prosecutor is going over the charges. It could happen if it does go a traditional route in the courtroom and the judge or magistrate recognize the risks, or the caseworker who's working that case. No matter where it happens, it could always come back to Safe Harbor Diversion. So anyone can be identified as appropriate for Safe Harbor Diversion. And like I said, those law enforcement officers, prosecutors, court staff, judicial officers, anybody can identify that youth based on various means, whether it be the case that brought them to us or a screening tool. So we developed a screening tool to ask some questions to youth, and that's asked to every youth who comes through our doors. And a lot of them might just seem like silly questions that we're asking them, like, have you ever had a job? And if they answer yes, okay. Have you ever worked in a place that made you feel scared or unsafe? Have you ever been afraid to leave a work situation due to fears or threats of violence to yourself or your family? Right there, we're screening for like labor trafficking, for example. We'll then go on and ask more questions specifically about, have you ever run away or stayed away from home or left your home without permission? If the youth answers yes for that, we'll ask them questions more in depth, like, how many times would you guess? How often? Now, if a kid's just saying, I left my house without permission, it happened one time, I went down to the park, I feel really guilty, I got in a lot of trouble, obviously we're not gonna enter them into our Safe Harbor Diversion program. But if the youth identifies that they've run away from home on many occasions, they stayed with their friend, they felt pressured to stay there, that's gonna be a red flag, and we'll have them meet with our behavioral health team to have a more in-depth assessment with a more trauma-informed professional. So if that youth does flag on that screening tool, referral, like I said, will be made to that behavioral health court staff. And they're going to conduct a more in-depth assessment to see if Safe Harbor Diversion is appropriate for that youth. And why we do that is we just want to make sure we're not putting everybody in this if they don't need to be in it. Sometimes there are environmental factors as to why things happen, and other times it's not. So it's just good to get more guidelines and basis on what is going on with that youth and what's going on in that family life to see if safe harbor diversion is appropriate. If that behavioral health staff member does identify, yes, I think this is going to be appropriate, then we're going to go ahead and appoint an attorney and a guardian ad litem to that youth. And that's going to be free, no cost to the youth or family, because like I said, diversion, it's informal, it's free, there's no court costs or fines. We don't want to try to help the youth by giving them attorney fees or a guardian ad litem fee. So we're going to appoint that to them. The attorney is going to meet with the youth. They're going to talk about their charge. They're going to talk about safe harbor diversion. The guardian ad litem is going to go and meet with the family at the home and conduct a little screening there and just see, okay, everybody's in agreement that safe harbor will work, that they want to proceed. And that's the big part here, is that a youth has to consent to being a part of safe harbor diversion. If they don't, then we'll just keep going the traditional path, whichever way they were going in court, whether that was formally filed or informally through diversion or PYD. If that youth does consent to safe harbor diversion, then we'll go ahead and we'll meet with them. We'll schedule a regular diversion interview with them. And that's where I'll go over their charges. They'll have to admit to their charge. They will not have to admit to being a victim of human trafficking. And I'll create, instead of a case plan, it's very similar to that, but it's called an empowerment plan. So that's going to be based on what the youth's charged with, but it's also going to be based on what that youth's needs are. So if that youth on one of my assessments maybe has a lot of red flags on our mental health assessment, then I'm going to go ahead and encourage that youth and family and have it on that empowerment plan for them to be linked with counseling services. Every youth that goes through safe harbor diversion, we're going to make a referral to Gracehaven, which is the agency of which Alicia works at. And that's so that a trauma-informed professional who works with victims of human trafficking as their job can work with that youth on providing education on maybe the situations that they've gone through, how to better help themselves and prevent this from happening in the future, and also to give them education on why it is we're doing all of this. And that's just more for like educational purposes, like I said, but also that case management and wraparound services for the youth and family. We're not here forever. We can be involved with the youth for 3 90-day interventions, and that can be all at once. But the idea is that we don't want that youth and family to have all these services wrapped around them, and then as soon as the court pulls out, then they're just back to square one without having that support. So the idea is that, you know, they'll have that case management service with Gracehaven, and that will be able to be ongoing regardless of whether or not the court's involved. And then, like I said, a successful completion of diversion will get that youth the charges sealed and expunged as if it never happened. And that's all I've got too. So any questions for Alicia or myself?
I don't have any questions in the chat. You guys, if anyone has anything, just feel free to unmute. Oh, wait, back that up. I do have a question in the chat. Do you see victims who are adults with intellectual disabilities, and some of those adults lack concepts such as stranger danger and can be very trusting of pretty much everyone?
Gracehaven only works with minors. So we work with people up to about the age of 19. So we do not, if it is someone who has some kind of intellectual disability or some kind of diagnosis, and we have started working with them when they're a minor, like 17, we will continue to work with them maybe until they're 21, just kind of based on their case plan and kind of like what their whole entire support team thinks is good and needed. So that would kind of be the only reason or the only time that we're really working with those that are of adult age. But I
Thank
do
you.
agree with you that it's really hard for them to understand stranger danger, and how to like implement those boundaries and things like that.
Anybody else have any other questions? I don't have any more in the chat.
I just wanted to ask about some online stuff for kids. I know besides building the friendships and things of that nature, that's reinforcing, but I guess what else keeps them going back? Is it just that much that keeps them going back, that friendship that's being developed, the relationship? Or is there other things that, I'm just trying to understand that, because it's an online, it's not, in person, and they're not
Yeah.
like getting gifts and things. I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, I do think a lot of it is the relational piece. But it may be, I think there's a lot of like, you can count on me, I'm your ride or die. Let's exchange secrets. Let's really become dependent on one another. And I think that person, they're going to be texting all the time. As soon as you're out of school, you're getting a text message from that person, or I really need you. I'm going through a lot in my life. I think there's that, just like that relational dependency that comes upon it. And I think that if there's like pictures exchanged or some kind of crisis that happens, even if someone is like, oh my gosh, this just big thing just happened in my life, I really need you to be there for me. And then that, even if it's a fake crisis, but the youth doesn't know it, there's like a bonding agent, right? Like we bond when we go through hard things together. And so I think that traffickers will utilize those kinds of tools to kind of keep that person in that kind of relationship. And they'll probably try to gather as much information they can in those initial stages of like, where do you live and what school do you go to, and just kind of making that, and then they can just use that as threats. I'll come to your school, or you told me where I live, and then just kind of make that person feel like they can't get out of it. But especially if it's a kid who isn't accepted at home, or is having trouble with friends at school, or is an outcast, and we're just created so much to like be with people that might be what they feel like is all I can get and all that I'm worth.
Okay. Yeah, it's sad.
It is.
Very unfortunate for kids.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
I just know one young girl that lives on her iPad, is so isolated from her family, doesn't want anything to do with them. I mean, just totally school and the iPad, school and iPad. And I'm very worried, very worried. So
yeah, she's a vulnerability. She has a high vulnerability, it sounds like, with just kind of lack of feeling support and isolation. Yeah.
Yeah. And so does anything ever happen with the online stuff? Like, is there a way that if it's identified that those online perpetrators per se can be convicted or prosecuted somehow?
Yeah, there is. There are a lot of stings that are just even police or people, when there's like someone, a decoy, right? I see all the time, there's like stories where police will pretend to be underage and then will set up a meetup. So there's those kinds of things. There's also would be like sextortion or pornography, if they have like pictures of the youth and that kind of thing. I'm not sure, because I'm not in law enforcement, how much someone can get in trouble if they're like in that grooming process. I don't really know enough about that to know specifically. I do think that they could get in some kind of trouble, but I don't really know exactly what that looks like or what that entails.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious. Yeah. Well, thank you for the information.
Sure. Jeff, I saw your question about, is there classes for kids to learn more about this? Gracehaven does do presentations. We're happy to do them in schools. We're happy to do them at churches and youth groups. We're happy to do them at after school centers or anything like that. And we do that all around Ohio, talking to kids about some of the things that we talked about, like the prevalence in Ohio and the myths and the facts. And then we talk a lot about unmasking the grooming process. So how do I know if someone is safe or not safe? And what does the grooming process look like? And how can I protect myself online? And then we also actually have volunteers who will be presenters for Gracehaven too. And there is somebody in Franklin County who is going through the training process at Gracehaven, who will be able to do presentations specifically in Fairfield County where she lives too. Reach out to me in email info@gracehaven.me and say, hey, I'd like to have a Gracehaven come do a presentation, and then I will also get that email and I'll reach out to you. Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Kayla's got you covered.
Oh, beat me.
Okay.
Alicia,
Anybody-
I'm sorry, I was just going to ask one other question.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify Gracehaven. So, because I know there's a Gracehaven for women, and now we're talking, is this two separate places?
Yeah, I'm not familiar of a Gracehaven for
Yes.
women, but
Gracehaven
yeah.
in Lancaster is, well,
Okay,
in Lancaster area, but it is, it's a home, an organization for women who have been addicted or homeless, and they can come there and kind of do a step-by-step process
Okay.
of getting back on their feet. But yes, we've had them on before too, Kim. But they're local to Lancaster. I've had other people ask me that as well.
So it's two separate
Yep.
agencies. Oh, okay, all right, thank you.
And theirs is Gracehaven, 2 words.
Okay,
That's how I
gotcha.
think
oh,
about
the
it
other one
differently.
is,
Yeah.
Okay.
I also put a in the chat a link to our website if you guys just wanted to kind of look for more information about understanding who we are, what we do. That's in there for you too.
All right, good. Well, thank you. Thank you both so much for joining and giving us that information. I met these ladies at another training, which was the same kind of training, but much larger scale. And I'm like, okay, we need to present this. We need to have it out in more ways for people to be able to view it. So I appreciate everyone joining today to hear that information. And if you have any other questions, you can reach out to them as well.